After 12 years and the shipping time from Japan, Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP is finally here. Lollipop Chainsaw is one of those games that's impossible to forget. Originally released in 2012 for the Xbox 360 and PS3, which is where it languished for years. You see, it's one of those rare games that wasn't available through backwards compatibility on PlayStation or Xbox consoles, and it was never released on PC. So for well over a decade, the only legitimate way to play it was on the original hardware. But like the brain-craving undead ravaging San Romero High School, Lollipop Chainsaw has risen from the dead in Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP, a remaster that was released on pretty much everything. Last and current-gen consoles, and even Switch and PC, almost as if righting a decades-old wrong. I'm sure for the small but dedicated fans, you don't need me to tell you to play this game. And for anyone who hated the original, RePOP won't win you over. But for those who've never played the original, or were turned off by its rougher edges, this may be exactly what you're looking for. So, after doing absolutely everything and completing this game 100%, let's talk about the game, the improvements from the original, and some of the disappointments too.
You think that hurts me? I just jizzed a little.
The original game was developed by Grasshopper Manufacture of Shadows of the Damned, No More Heroes, and Killer 7. They're known for making these offbeat games with a style unlike any other studio, and they rarely fit neatly into standard video game genres, which should come as no surprise considering the founder of Grasshopper Manufacture and director of Lollipop Chainsaw is Goichi Suda, also known as Suda51. There are very few auteurs in video games, those creators that leave their unmistakable fingerprints on everything they touch. Only a handful come to mind, like Hideo Kojima, Ken Levine, or David Jaffe, and Suda51 absolutely is among them. His games are unabashedly crass and sexy and violent, never taking themselves too seriously, but not just a joke either. It's this indelible uniqueness that makes for small cult fan bases. Now, joining Suda was an unlikely dream team of talent, with writing credits by James Gunn. Yeah, that James Gunn. Who'd have thought that before directing Guardians of the Galaxy, he'd be writing this?
I'm sorry, Juliet. I don't want to fuck up your birthday.
Oh yeah, and the music duties were given to none other than Akira Yamaoka, the guy behind Silent Hill's music, some of the most iconic music, full stop. And he had a hand in shaping the soundscape here, creating an eclectic mix that didn't make any sense, but somehow totally worked. And I'll talk about my thoughts on RePOP's music later. So with talent like this, you can see why this game is so distinctive. It's like a sparkly fever dream, where it's constantly trying to one-up itself for sheer insanity. The remaster is the first game developed by the newly formed Dragami Games, a subsidiary of Extreme, led by Yoshimi Yasuda, so we should be in good hands. To boil it down, Lollipop Chainsaw is a hack-and-slash action game, with an insane mix of over-the-top violence, raunchy humor, and sexy saccharine visuals.
Welcome to my bedroom.
You play as Juliet Starling, a ditzy cheerleader from San Romero High School who just turned 18. Though that's probably so you don't feel weird about the upskirt shots or shower scene in the first few minutes. Today's a big day for Juliet. Not only is it her birthday, but she's planning to introduce her boyfriend Nick to her family for the first time. That's a big deal for anyone, but a slightly bigger deal is the zombie apocalypse.
Ooh, that's bad.
But here's the thing, Juliet just so happens to come from a long line of zombie hunters.
That's good.
Now unfortunately, Nick doesn't, and quickly loses his head.
That's bad.
Good thing Nick's girlfriend is a zombie-slaying badass, taking out the horde and saving, well, Nick's head.
I love you too, baby.
Can I go now?
You can see just what type of insanity we're dealing with, and this is like the first 10 minutes of the game. Few games establish a tone as firmly and quickly as this one, and even fewer are willing to leave you behind if you aren't into it. If you can't hang with the nonsense from the start, you won't keep up as the obscene lunacy spirals further out of control. The rest of the 6 or so hours is filled with bloody violence, sexy innuendo, poop jokes, and 12-year-old pop culture references, which, yeah, feel pretty outdated more than a decade later.
That My Chemical Romance wannabe is destroying San Romero!
Oh, love that song Teenager. Have you heard that?
Now, if you're overly sensitive and likely to be easily offended by crass humor and boobs, this probably isn't the right game for you. But if you can get in the right headspace and remember, these are jokes, and this is meant to be entertaining, you'll probably enjoy yourself quite a bit.
Juliet, I am so totally gonna masturbate to you tonight.
It feels refreshing to have this style of humor in a game, where it hasn't been corporatized, workshopped, or sanitized into blandness. And this is what makes Suda's games so much fun. There's an absolute hurricane of the most batshit things constantly hurled your way. So, now Juliet and Nick's head go around sawing through waves of the undead in over-the-top combat and sparkles. Narrative aside, Lollipop Chainsaw is all about the gameplay, and for the most part, it's fine. While mostly a traditional hack and slasher, Lollipop Chainsaw mixes things up enough to set itself apart. And even though there ultimately isn't a ton of depth, it doesn't stick around long enough to wear thin. Juliet was trained by Sensei Morikawa in a type of zombie foo, using a chainsaw, of course. Hence, the name of the game. Oh yeah, and there are actually lollipops too that restore your health. You know, like real lollipops. And just like real lollipops, there's a downside.
It's already so sweet to never complain about my ginormous fat butt.
In addition to lollipops and chainsaws, you also have a gigantic gun, pom-poms, and sometimes Nick's head to fight back against the denizens of the undead. The pom-poms use quick strikes and are best for stunning zombies. The chainsaw is good for close combat, but is heavy and slow with high and low attacks that can leave you vulnerable. So you'll want to daze zombies with a few swift punches from the pom-poms and then finish them off with your chainsaw. You know, the old 1-2. And after building up your gauge, you can go into sparkle mode, letting you absolutely wreck the undead for a short amount of time. Anyone familiar with the original will immediately notice some of RePOP's improvements. First off, the visuals have been given a new coat of paint and are far cleaner than the original. More on the visuals later. The camera was a half nightmare originally, with a mind all its own, getting stuck in the environment geometry, and that's mostly been fixed here. Also, Juliet's movements feel more responsive, and the animations connecting her movements also look a lot better. That being said, it still doesn't play like a current character action game. You see, Juliet's basic moves, tied to a couple attacks and a jump dodge, feel really limiting, and don't flow together until late in the game when you've unlocked more of the combos and weapons. And it rarely feels impactful when your hits connect. Although this is one of those games where the longer you play, the better it all feels. After beefing Juliet up a bit, you settle into a nice rhythm of carnage where you'll be mowing down hordes of the undead with flashy spectacle, using lots of different moves and weapons as blood sprays, body parts fly, and sparkles shoot from everywhere. Some of the trophy guides will tell you to start the game on hard to prevent too many playthroughs, but in my experience, hard difficulty is a ton of fun when replaying stages after leveling Juliet up a bit, but early on she's too weak, the enemies are too spongy, and the combat is far too repetitive to be enjoyable. Of course, there's no better way to test out the new combos than on the different types of zombies. Most games are comfortable with recycling the same enemy types throughout, but Lollipop Chainsaw introduces new zombies almost constantly, mixing them in with the rank and file from previous stages. Not only do they look different, but they all fight differently too. There's football players that tackle Juliet, cops that shoot from a distance, firefighters that literally breathe fire, explodey dudes strapped with dynamite, hell, there's even zombie cows. And of course, every zombie horde needs a zombie ringleader. What would a Suda game be without demented boss fights? And other than one, they're all really entertaining. They're all incredibly varied as well, which makes fighting each one a completely different experience. Whether fighting Zed on stage at a concert as he fights you with his words, or Vicky on a floating Viking ship shielded by lightning so you can't hit him straight on. These are a great highlight, mixing up the formula and bursting with personality. I freaking love the characters in this game. Nick and Juliet are perfect together. Now Nick can't really do much. I mean, he's just a head strapped to Juliet's waist after all, but he's pretty damn funny. He's kind of like a proxy for the player, commenting on all the crazy shit happening.
It is fun!
It makes me forget that most of my friends are dead.
Juliet is the eternal optimist, like still planning out their future together despite their current, circumstances.
First of all, I can put you in a bag and sneak you into movies for free!
All right, that hardly makes up for...
Carpal tunnel syndrome? You're immune. And it's totally cool! I'm like the only girl with a decapitated head for a boyfriend.
I have to say, some of the funniest moments were his reactions in his conversations with Juliet. Just super well written.
Something fishy is going on.
No way. This is all totally normal.
And no one can convince me that Lollipop Chainsaw didn't directly influence God of War. No, seriously.
How is he here? That is not possible.
What?
Don't hate me!
And then you have Sensei Morikawa, a dirty old man with badass fighting skills who finds himself in the squishiest situations.
Oh! Yeah!
Or all of Juliet's zombie-slaying family members, like Cordelia, essentially an assassin, or Rosalind, her younger and more klutzy sister, who's loving every second of the madness. These moments were usually brief, but it was cool to see how each of these characters supported Juliet. And that includes giving her a birthday present. While the level design is pretty basic, mostly just combat arenas with linear bits connecting them, there's more to do in the world than just saw enemies into bloody chunks. Exploration is fairly minimal, but you'll want to keep an eye out for coins or lollipops just off the beaten path or hidden in lockers, trash cans, and vending machines. Like a kid with ADHD, you're rarely doing the same thing for more than a few minutes. Sprinkled throughout are a slew of mini-games and little side diversions, like keeping flaming zombies from blowing up a pile of explosives, or decapitating zombies to score points in zombie basketball, or probably the most hated in the original with zombie baseball, where you try to protect Nick while he scores home runs. You'll blast the opposing team of undead players and cheerleaders to clear a path for Nick. Yes, it's ridiculous, and yes, it's awesome. Oh yeah, one thing about Nick and his, condition. He's not just a simple fashion accessory. Nick's head can be placed on a number of headless zombies, allowing him to take control of the body. You'll use this for minigames as well as clearing obstacles blocking your way. You're usually not really controlling Nick so much as just doing QTEs until he reaches his goal. Throughout the original were tons of split-second accurate QTEs, and while those sections remain, they're set to automatic by default in RePOP. It's a little strange considering it completely removes any of their challenge. Like they went from rage-inducingly precise to laughably easy. I would have preferred some middle ground, but I didn't like how pointless they felt on automatic, so I ended up just reverting them back to the original versions. But for anyone who hates QuickTime events with instant fail states, this should be a welcome change. And the nice thing is you can change them back and forth to your heart's content. The game feels better and better as you level up. By killing zombies and destroying things like running your chainsaw over school lockers or trash cans, you'll earn gold medals that you can use for new upgrades, moves, or items at shop-to-shop terminals. Killing 3 or more enemies at the same time will activate Sparkle Hunting, granting you a medal bonus and platinum medals. The amount of zombies killed in Sparkle Hunting will also add to your score. So if you're a trophy hunter, you'll also want to be a Sparkle Hunter. Okay, so what do you do with all of this coin just burning a hole in Juliet's, skirt? Well, you can buy upgrades to Juliet's base stats like power, health, and recovery when knocked down. You can also buy new combos, really opening up combat, making everything feel more fluid. On top of that, there are music and art collectibles you can unlock, as well as cosmetics. And there are a ton of costumes, hair color, and even skins for your chainsaw to unlock. Yeah, before Stellar Blade did it.
Simpsons did it! Simpsons did it!
Yeah, probably. But Lollipop Chainsaw was one of the first and one of the best to pack a giant wardrobe full of skin-tight outfits. And some of the designs have been updated for RePOP, looking better than ever. I've always been a huge fan of being able to change the look of my characters in games, and the sheer variety on offer is just killer. You can change Juliet's look between levels or at shop-to-shop terminals, so I found myself changing pretty much every time I got a chance. Some of these upgrades cost gold coins, and some can only be unlocked with platinum. There are no experience points outside of the medals, but it does a good job of continually doling out rewards. At set points, Juliet will get birthday presents. These add whole new capabilities to your chainsaw for use in combat and puzzles or environmental challenges. Like the Chainsaw Dash, letting you run through zombies or use ramps to get over obstacles. Or the Chainsaw Blaster, turning your chainsaw into a gun. Somehow, the fun for me really started to pick up after unlocking a variety of new moves, chainsaw skills, and outfits. Whether you upgrade her combos or have her pole dancing while waving her chainsaw around, you'll most likely never get bored of watching Juliet prance around the screen in some new skimpy outfit, killing a myriad of different zombies. The original was fairly rough looking, even for its time, but it made up for a lack of graphical power with its flashy style and insane art direction. RePOP looks the same, but just a lot cleaner. Don't expect this game to look like a current-gen AAA release. This very much looks like the original, just cleaned up a bit. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. On every system except for the Switch, you now get a clean 4K at 60 frames a second, in HD and 30 frames a second on the Switch. If you were hoping for more of a graphical facelift, you might be disappointed, but it's still cool to see the original version crystal clear and playing buttery smooth. Occasionally I noticed some effects that blew out the lighting, but that was pretty rare. The Grindhouse film themes and vivid, girly aesthetic exist on such opposite ends of the style spectrum that the carnage always looks awesome, especially against the backdrop of the rock soundtrack. And that's actually one of the biggest disappointments in RePOP, the updated soundtrack. The original was filled to the brim with licensed music, a shockingly diverse yet somehow cohesive mix of songs, ranging from 50s bebop to aggressive punk, but almost every track has been removed. All that remains is Lollipop Lollipop. If you played the original, you know how integral these songs were to the overall experience, like hearing Hey Mickey when going into sparkle mode, or You Spin Me Right Round when mowing down zombies with a thresher. I'm sure trying to license the same tracks 12 years later would have cost the GDP of a small country, and it's not like the new music is awful, but definitely some of the unique personality has been lost. Now, with RePOP there are a few new additions. There are 2 different modes to choose, Original or RePOP mode. Original is based on the original.
Well, duh.
RePOP mode shows less violence and more stylized pop art damage effects. That mode was actually funnier than I expected it to be, but ultimately I stuck with the original mode. There are those additional cosmetic items that you can purchase for Juliet, and loading times are way shorter. Seriously, there are times the loading is so quick, the loading screen just flashes on the screen for a second, and then it's an abrupt transition to the next area. Lollipop Chainsaw is still fun, if rather short, clocking in at 6 hours for a single playthrough. However, you can probably quadruple that time if you're a completionist. To get the platinum, plan for at least 3 playthroughs, 1 on hard difficulty, 1 to beat Dad's time, and 1 in time attack mode. You'll want to get both endings, rescue all of the classmates, fully upgrade Juliet, and generally kick the crap out of thousands of zombies in creative ways. Now the combat really does start to wear thin after a while, but I didn't mind a ton since the game isn't overly long, and I was constantly unlocking new combos and, of course, new outfits. There isn't a New Game Plus, but you can replay stages to clean up anything you missed with all of your acquired upgrades, with the exception of any birthday presents that you wouldn't have received by that stage in the story. Okay, clearly I have an affinity for weird, violent, and sexy games, and while I'm very happy to have this game available on modern hardware, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the game looks and feels better than ever, and I was happy that the original humor wasn't touched. On the other hand, the game is almost too faithful, with very minimal improvements. It looks a little cleaner, and plays a little better, but it's still a 2012 game under the hood. However, in the end, this is still Lollipop motherfucking Chainsaw. It still has all of Suda51's style and apparently James Gunn's fingerprints throughout. Games are simply not made like this these days. If you're looking for deep mechanics, refined combat, or any sort of meaningful narrative, you're gonna be left disappointed. But if you look at this footage and say, hell yeah, you're gonna dig Lollipop Chainsaw RePOP. If you liked the video, hit like, drop a comment, and of course subscribe. And if you want more of my thoughts, check out my video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Douchebags!